I heard someone say one time years ago that in the 1940s there was no city on earth like New York City. In the 1940s it was the greatest city on the planet. You could find everything there in a way you couldn't find it in London, in Paris, in Cairo, in Los Angeles. I've heard it said that New York City peaked in the 1940s as a place unlike any other on earth. And it truly was the city where if you could make it there, you could make it anywhere. And I always wished I could have gone back in time and taken a peek at New York City in the 1940s. Well, imagine growing up in a small town in America, being a young girl, getting to the age of 17 and deciding that small-town life wasn't for you, that you wanted to go where the lights were, where the hustle and bustle existed, that you wanted to go to the greatest city on earth. That's what happened to Jeanne Koelsch back in 1946, and she is my guest this hour. Hello, Jeanne, welcome.
Hi, Tom. Nice to be here.
Jeanne, paint a picture for me of your town in Pennsylvania where you grew up.
Oh, it was a small mining town, and we had some tragic events that occurred there. For instance, our high school caved one evening, and then we had to walk while the moon was out through fields to get to another small school after that. We had, when the whistle would blow, we knew that their men were trapped in the mines, and my friends had their fathers and brothers there. So that was always frightening. Also, a half block down the street where I lived, a woman was walking with her child. She was holding her one child and walking, and the other one was walking beside her. A large truck drove by at the same time. The earth opened up and just engulfed the little girl. So things like that happened there, and it was a little bit frightening, but I also kept myself busy, even though it was a small town. I went to school in the morning because of our school being caved. We only had morning classes. I worked in the afternoon at a store in town. At night, I worked. I played piano, and I played in a 14-piece orchestra, even though I took just a year and a half lessons from a high school girl at 13. So I was quite busy, but I really wanted more. I wanted to see more about life and people.
It's
luckily
interesting.
My mother and father agreed that I could go to New York and see what it was all about.
I don't know if there are many mothers and fathers today who would be okay with that, maybe, but you're 17 years old and you're saying, it's time for me to go see the world, and there's this wild city, New York City, nothing like it on planet Earth. I don't know anybody there. I'm going to head out alone. I'm going to leave with $60 in my pocket, and I'm going to go make my way in this world. See you, Mom and Dad. And they said, best of luck to you, Jeanne. Now, they probably didn't expect you to be gone too long. They probably figured you'd be back in a couple of weeks, tail between your legs. But you were determined, and you arrived in that big city as this girl from a small town and decided that the ticket for you might be modeling. I don't know how many women back then thought that might be the ticket. I don't know how many girls like you left small towns wanting to be a model in New York. But you found some place that would take you in. Who was that?
Yes, that was the Barbizon Modeling School. I mean, it's not that my aspirations were in modeling. I really didn't feel that way, but it was a way of getting to New York, a place to live. They offered a 3-week initial course for $5, would you believe it? And then hotel accommodations, $5 a week. So I thought, well, I could afford that, and that's a great way to start. So that's what I did. And after that, I did some modeling. I'm not very tall, so I did a lot of showroom modeling and entered some beauty contests. But in the meantime, I was always working somewhere just to make ends meet. And one time I was working as a model in a convention, noticed this caricaturist in action. He was working in another booth, and I was very interested in his work. I liked it so much I talked with him, and then he said, well, why don't you come to my office someday, and I'll show you more, which I did in a few weeks. After a while, we talked, and I started working for him as an assistant. I booked him at conventions where he drew for many companies, and I assisted him in writing an entertainment column, which appeared in many papers around the country. So I learned all that, and after a while, I was assisting him when he would go on his bookings. Also, after a while, I started drawing because I watched him draw. I learned, and I thought, gee, this is something I'd love to do. Now, I'll go on from there. After a while, I guess I was about 21, 22 at this time, and I did not want to work with him anymore because he was very difficult and possessive. And so I just felt I had to make a change. Everyone, even my family, just said, don't take the risk and don't go on your own. I don't think you'll be able to make it. But I was determined. I thought, well, they can only say no. I made up a little brochure, pink, believe it or not, and with my typewriter I pasted little things and typed up a little brochure and went to a library, researched all the large companies, sent them this brochure. And, Tom, in 2 weeks I had a booking with Firestone Tire and Rubber.
Well, now, before you talk about this booking, this ad that you did, now, again, folks, follow the chronology here. She arrives in New York City with $60. Her dad expects her back in 3 weeks. She doesn't come back in 3 weeks. She ends up working, doing some modeling. Actually, you obviously were a very attractive woman. You went on to become, let me see if I have this, Miss U.S. Marines, Miss Brooklyn Dodgers, Miss NBC, Miss Silk Stockings. I've never heard of half these things. There are more misses out there than I knew existed.
Yes, well, the Silk Stockings was a premiere for the Silk Stocking movie in that day. But I did that for recognition, and also I didn't want to be modeling. No, I didn't want that. I wanted to do something more intelligent and
creative.
Yeah, be creative, right?
But here's what's interesting to me. So you stumble upon this caricaturist. You become his assistant. You learn how to do these caricatures, and now you want to branch out on your own and let the people know what your ad said, what you were asking for.
Oh, yes. Well, when I worked, he was paying me $35 a week.
This caricaturist.
Yes.
But I'm talking about when you went out on your own.
And yes, when I went out on my own, I knew what he was making himself, and he would ask for train fare and hotel accommodation. So what I did, I asked for $150 an hour, plus first-class airfare, first-class hotel accommodations.
So in other words, you were offering your services to big corporations who might have conventions or might have these parties or gatherings where they'd want a caricaturist, and whatever year this was, 1950, somewhere around there, you wanted $150 an hour, first-class airfare, first-class hotel accommodations, and you had never done this on your own before, and you got hired. And your take is, perhaps because you shot for the moon, they thought, boy, this woman must be pretty good.
Yeah, I think that might have been it, because then I said, well, when they booked me, well, I have to prove myself.
Yeah.
And I did. I worked so diligently. Actually, I mentioned some of the companies I worked for.
Yep.
Okay, well, it was Colgate, Canada Dry, Pepsi-Cola, Time Magazine at least 10 or 12 times a year, New York Life Insurance, and it just goes on, Avon. And these are all over the country. Now, the reason they booked me over and over again, and they also gave me bonuses. They felt maybe they didn't pay me enough, and I was getting extra money at the end. I was getting gifts. One actually insisted that his vice president take me to Cartier's, and that I chose out any kind of brooch I wanted. Of course, I chose a small one because I thought that was too expensive. And the reason I did this because I was the hit of the show. I was always nervous before, but once I started drawing, I felt good. And the lines would just go right around the corner, and everyone else in these convention halls would see that this booth was the most attractive. So it was just wonderful for me. And I also worked at cocktail parties for them, and lunches and sales meetings and all that. But, you have to work hard, and I did. I was very diligent. I proved myself, and I was rewarded.
Well, eventually, you find yourself in crowds with a who's who of the biggest celebrities of that time. Numerous celebrities are sketched by you. You work at Elizabeth Taylor's birthday party. You chat with Marilyn Monroe. You end up becoming friends with Sammy Kahn. You hobnob with Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin before their breakup.
Mm-hmm. And that's the fabulous 50s, you know.
Date Robert Stack, catch the attentions of Humphrey Bogart, chatted up with Frank Sinatra. At one point, Jimmy Durante wants to take you back to his hotel room. You ended up having a rather extraordinary life, traveling all over the place as a caricaturist. Now, if I said to somebody, I know this real attractive woman who in 1950 hung out with all of these people, and I named everybody who was anybody back then, and I said, what do you think she did? They would say, well, she was either an actress or a singer or a groupie. Who the hell would come up with caricaturist? Who would ever think that that's the way you get around and meet all these folks? What's more extraordinary to me is the speed at which you worked. You would do a caricature in 90 seconds.
Yes, I because I had so many to do, and I did them quickly. And another thing that might be interesting for your audience is that when I was interviewed, I always said this: there are two schools of thought in caricaturing. One is exaggerating on features, and one on expression. Now, I didn't make them with big noses and big ears and all that. Some of them are quite grotesque. So, since I was drawing these companies, their guests and their clients, I didn't want anybody to get angry, but I still wanted to look like the person. So I exaggerated on expression, and that depicted their personality.
When I have trouble with those, picturing you have a 90-minute stretch at a given party, and in that period you put out 100 sketches. I can't. You must have been a wreck afterwards.
I was. It'd take me hours to unwind. Well, let me tell you how I did it. I put them in the little frame too for them. I had all that ready with their name printed on the bottom. I had a sketchboard, the little clipboard, and with the pencil I drew them quickly. Went down because I dropped all my things on the floor. Pick up the frame, put in the frame, and go to the next one. So it was physical exercise too, and it was tiring, but it was rewarding because they would laugh with themselves, and people would say, "Oh, Joe, that looks just like you," and that always made me feel good when people laugh at themselves. So that was the rewarding part.